Have you ever encountered a stranger on a deserted road who gave you chills down your spine? Imagine for a moment, you're driving down a lonely stretch of road, under the cloak of darkness. The only source of light is the eerie glow from your headlights, illuminating the path ahead. Suddenly, you spot a figure in the distance. A hitchhiker. A common sight, yet there's something unsettling about this one. Something that sends a shiver running down your spine. You might have heard stories, urban legends of spectral hitchhikers haunting desolate roads, weaving tales that blend the ordinary with the extraordinary, the natural with the supernatural. Stories that stir up the deepest fears and curiosities within us. Have you ever experienced such an encounter? Ever been left with questions that make your blood run cold? Well, sit back and prepare yourself for a chilling tale of a ghostly hitchhiker. It was a dark, stormy night when a lone driver saw a figure by the roadside. The sky was an inky black canvas punctuated by the occasional streak of lightning. Thunder echoed ominously, as if nature itself was voicing its discontent. The rain was relentless, battering against the car like 1,000 tiny fists. The driver, a man of about 40, was returning from a late-night shift. His eyes were heavy with fatigue, and the rhythmic patter of rain on the roof was lulling him to sleep. But he pressed on, his hands tightly gripping the steering wheel. The road was a deserted stretch, flanked by towering trees that seemed to reach out towards him, their branches swaying in the wind like skeletal arms. He had driven down this road countless times, but tonight it felt different. It felt ominous. Suddenly his headlights caught a figure standing by the roadside. A hitchhiker, he thought. On such a night, in the middle of nowhere? It was unusual, to say the least. The figure was indistinct, a mere silhouette against the stormy backdrop. But there was something about it that made him slow down. Curiosity, sympathy. He wasn't sure. As he pulled over, the hitchhiker stepped into the light. The driver couldn't see much, save for a rain-soaked figure, head bowed against the onslaught of the storm. The hitchhiker seemed to be of average height, dressed in a long coat that seemed to be from another era. There was something oddly compelling about this stranger, something that piqued the driver's interest. He rolled down the window, the cold wind rushing in and making him shiver. He was about to offer a ride when he noticed something strange. The hitchhiker's feet. They weren't touching the ground. His heart pounded in his chest, a sudden fear gripping him. But before he could react, the hitchhiker had already climbed into the back seat. Little did the driver know his life was about to take an eerie turn. As the driver slowed down, he could see the hitchhiker more clearly. The road's dim lighting gave a hazy glow to the figure standing by the roadside. A long silhouette, draped in an old, worn-out coat that seemed to have been in fashion 2 decades ago. The coat's collar was pulled up, shadowing his face, but as the car's headlights hit him, his features were revealed. His face was pale as moonlight, a stark contrast to the dark night around him. His eyes, a chilling shade of blue, seemed to be looking past the car, past the driver, into the void of the night. His lips, almost colorless, were set in a grim line, as if he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. His hair was jet black, slicked back with precision, not a single strand out of place. The man's attire was peculiar, to say the least. His coat, although out of date, was immaculate, as if it had just been taken out of a time capsule. Under the coat, he wore an old-fashioned suit, the kind you'd see in black and white movies from the 40s. His shoes, shining in the car's headlights, had an air of elegance, but also strangeness, like they didn't belong in this era. The driver felt a shiver run down his spine as he took in the sight. There was something off about this hitchhiker, something that made the hairs at the back of his neck stand up, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Was it the man's cold eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories? Or was it his outdated attire that seemed to have been plucked straight out of a forgotten era? The driver's mind screamed at him to drive away, to leave the hitchhiker and his eerie aura behind. But some inexplicable force made him stop. He rolled down the window, his heart pounding in his chest, as he looked at the ghostly figure. "Need a ride?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The hitchhiker nodded, a cold smile playing on his lips. The driver, against his better judgment, decided to offer him a ride. The car's interior light cast an eerie glow on the hitchhiker's face as he got in. A hushed silence fell over the vehicle, the only sound being the purr of the engine and the occasional rustling of the wind outside. The journey began, the car's headlights piercing through the veil of the night, illuminating the deserted road ahead. The driver, a man of usually unwavering nerve, felt an unsettling cold creep up his spine. He tried to break the unnerving silence, attempting light conversation, asking the hitchhiker where he was headed. But the response was a mere shrug and a hollow gaze that remained fixated on the road ahead. The driver tried again, asking about the hitchhiker's name, his hometown, anything to fill the void of silence. But all he got in return was an eerie silence and a cold, empty stare. As the minutes ticked by, the driver's fear escalated. The atmosphere in the car grew dense, the silence deafening. The driver's heart pounded in his chest, the rhythm syncing with the ticking of the car clock. The hitchhiker remained an enigma, his silence echoing louder than any words. The driver began to question his decision of picking up this stranger. His mind raced, weaving tales of horror and suspense, feeding his fear. The hitchhiker's presence, his silence, his ominous stare, it all seemed to be part of some ghastly riddle the driver was yet to solve. And then, out of nowhere, the hitchhiker spoke, his voice a chilling whisper that shattered the silence. He asked to be dropped off, pointing to a dilapidated house in the distance. The driver's heart skipped a beat, his fear reaching its peak. There, amidst the desolation, stood a house that looked like it hadn't been touched by life in decades. Suddenly, the hitchhiker asked to be dropped off, pointing to a dilapidated house in the distance. This was the moment the driver's fear turned into an unbearable dread, the moment when the ghostly journey took a turn towards the terrifying unknown. The driver pulled up near the house, but when he turned around, the back seat was empty. A rush of cold air swept through the cabin, the chill creeping up his spine. There was an eerie silence, broken only by the soft hum of the car engine. The seat, previously occupied by the hitchhiker, was now vacant, as if no one had been there at all. His heart pounded in his chest, the rhythm echoing in his ears. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck standing up, a primal instinct warning him of something unnatural. He scanned the rearview mirror, hoping to catch a glimpse of the hitchhiker, but all he saw was the empty road bathed in the soft glow of the car's taillights. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open and stepped out into the night. The gravel crunched under his boots, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. He looked around, his gaze darting from one shadow to another, but there was no sign of the hitchhiker. He walked around the car, his heart pounding in his chest. His eyes were drawn to the back seat, the vacant space seeming to mock him. He felt a shiver run down his spine as he recalled the hitchhiker's words, their meaning now taking on a sinister twist. An old woman opened the door, her face lined with sorrow. The driver, still shaken, shared his encounter with the young hitchhiker. The woman's eyes welled up with tears as she listened, her frail hands clutching a faded photograph of the very same young man. The driver's heart skipped a beat. The woman shared her tragic tale. Her son, once full of life and dreams, was taken from her in a cruel twist of fate. A car accident on this very road had claimed his life years ago. Each year on the anniversary of his death, she would light a candle in his memory, hoping that his restless spirit would find peace. The driver was left speechless, his spine chilled as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The young hitchhiker was a ghost. As the truth sank in, the driver was left standing there, in the cold, haunted by the ghostly hitchhiker.